Alright, so we are back with a very exciting lecture here, and in this lecture you are going to learn different calculations within your pivot table. And these calculations won't be possible without the techniques that we are going to learn in this particular lecture. But first of all, let me remind you, we are using the same Excel file that we are using in this section, and this file again is starting from scratch where we do not have any pivot table already inserted. So let us start by inserting a pivot table here. Insert pivot table, and that is all okay. Click on OK, and it has given a pivot table to us. And first of all, let me bring in some parameters to our pivot table, and in the row label I'm going to bring in store country, and in the values I'm going to bring in the sales revenue as well as the cost. And just to remind you, both of them, sales revenue and cost, are the total sales revenue and the total cost. And before I move forward, let me zoom in so that we can see the values on our screen. And here we have our data. I hope that you can see it now. Perfect. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to format these values nicely, so they should be in proper number format. For that, I will go here and I will click on the value field setting. I will also change the title, so I will make it simple sales revenue, or let's call it total sales revenue. And I will go to number format. I will click on number and comma separator and 2 decimal, and OK and OK. So we have the nicely formatted values for revenue. And let us do that for the cost as well. Value field settings and total cost, not the sum of cost, let's call it total cost. And then in the number format, I will go to number and comma separator 2 decimal, and OK and OK. Okay, so you can see that our values are now nicely formatted. The next thing that I need to do here is to calculate the profit. And if you don't know, let me tell you, the profit is basically the difference between revenue and the cost. So cost is the money that we spend in business. Revenue is the money that we collect from our customer in business. The difference between the two is called profit, that is the net earning of the business. Now to calculate the difference between these two fields, one wrong approach would be using the simple Excel approach of giving the reference and applying the deduction. And that would be something like equal sign this minus this, and you will get your answer, right? And you can see that your calculation is actually correct. If we take the difference between these two, the answer would be the same, 19,079.7. So even though the value is correct, this approach is absolutely wrong. And why is that so? Let me explain you. The first problem, that will actually be a smaller problem for us, is that we have to do it manually for each row. You can see if I drag it down, my answers will not be correct for these rows. So I need to work separately for each row, and these answers will not be correct even if I copy paste this formula downwards. So what we need to do is that now we need to do it manually for each row. And you can understand that is actually quite time wasting. We only have 3 rows here, but what if we are working for the cities rather than countries? We will have many different rows, and we cannot keep on doing this lazy approach, right? So I have calculated my values, but that is actually the wrong approach, so I'm going to delete that. But before I delete, let me show you the even bigger problem. And the even bigger problem is these values are static hardcore values, which means if I bring in any additional parameter, for example, if I bring in state, notice that these values have not dynamically changed. So now this row is not even representing USA, it is representing Mexico, but the value is hard coded, which was actually the answer for USA. This row was actually the answer for Mexico, which is now presented to British Columbia, and that is absolutely wrong. So we should be deleting these values, right? But before I delete, let me show you another problem, the same problem in another way. And that is, if I ignore these parameters from here and I bring in some other parameter, for example the brand name, I want to show you the revenue or profit by brand, and if I do that, you can see that these values are now again not even correct. And I hope you understand the problem now. So I will delete these values from here, and I will go back to the same data where I will have the country only. We will bring in all this data later on. So I will go down and I will bring in my country, store country. Right, so now let us use the right way, and that right way is calculate anywhere in this pivot table, and on this analyze tab, go to this tab here, fields, items and sets, and in this tab you will click on this calculated field. And once you do that, you will have this pop-up panel here, and in this pop-up panel, first of all we will give the name of our field, and that is going to be total profit for me in this case. The next argument is going to be formula, that the calculation that we need to do. And one very interesting thing that you will notice is that if I show you all of these fields here, these are all the fields from my data sheet. So all the fields that are available to me in this pivot table are again available to me here. And what we need to do is to calculate the profit, and the profit will be revenue. Double click or click here and click on insert field, revenue. And now go back to your formula tab and press minus sign because we need to deduct, and then come back here, click on cost, double click or just click on insert field, and once you do that, click on OK, and now you can see that you have these values available here, sum of total profit. And again I can do the formatting, but before I do that formatting, let me show you something very interesting, and that is this field, the newly calculated field, is now available to you in the list of field in this pivot table. This total profit was not available to you just a second ago, and this is also already selected here as sum of total profit. And if I go there, I click on value field settings and I click on my number format, and I will click on number and 2 decimal and comma separator and click on OK. You can see that this field has also now been formatted. So the whole point of telling that thing is that this field is now available to you as fields in your pivot table, and now you can use it anywhere. What does that mean? Let me explain you in some steps. First of all, now let us say you also want to see all that data not just by country but also by state. So how to do? Let us simply drag and drop the state here in our rows, and now you have all the data available in for all the states as well. So this calculation of profit is now a dynamic calculation, and you can see if I just focus on USA here, your total profit for USA is 217,322, but that 217,322 is distributed between states as 60,000 and 53 and 103, and sum of all of them is 217, and same is applicable for Mexico and for Canada as well. And now if you want to add the cities as well, it is as simple as dragging the field here and dropping it, and now you can see that your country is broken down to state and also then to city. So if I just focus on Canada here, Canada is 19,729. There's only one state, so that is again the same value coming from the state, and in the cities that is broken down as 15 and 4,000 for the cities. So I hope that you are now looking at the overall purpose of this field, adding this field here. And now if we have to analyze our data on any other parameter, so for example, I don't want to see this data by country or state by city, rather I want to see this by brand. So what I need to do is that I will simply drag all of these fields out, and I will drag in my new parameter, and that is going to be brand. Once selected, you have seen that your pivot table has not only given you the revenue and cost for each brand, it has also calculated the total profit for each of these brands very nicely. So that is the complete understanding of calculated fields, and I hope you are finding it valuable. Now before I wind up this lecture, I need to add another very important point, and please listen to that very carefully. Now if you look at the data again, you will notice that there was a field of profit or loss already given in the data, and I did not use that, and I did not use that for a specific purpose. And now if I bring that field here as well in the profit and loss, you will notice something very interesting, and that is this profit and loss is again the same values that we have calculated by using this calculated function here. So now the question is, why we have done this, why we have used this longer approach when the sum of profit or loss was already given to us in the data. And this question is something we need to answer ourselves. Well, the first thing is, we do not need to overpopulate our data when we can simply do the calculations in the pivot table. So if you will do any calculation in the data, you know that there will be thousands or even millions of rows, and that will actually overburden your data, and that will slow down the complete process. But if you do that in the pivot table, if you do that calculations in the pivot table, that will not be any load on the system. So that is the first reason. But another reason is even more important, and that is some of the profit and loss that you have calculated here in this data sheet. This column here, the column A, is coming from data sheet, and the column D is something that you have calculated yourself as pivot table field. Now this data that is coming in the column E from your data sheet, this may lead to wrong answers in some specific cases, especially where the multiplication and division is involved in the calculation. This will lead to wrong answers, and we actually need to calculate the fields ourselves to find the correct values. And what does that mean? I'm going to show that specifically in the next lecture. So let us continue with that.